So now we'll take a look at how we can add patterns to sounds and groups of sounds once we've loaded them in. So we'll go back to our browser here and let's just switch to the software and make sure when we load in a group, we're not going to load in the pattern as well. And let's just navigate to a group. Let's load a drum kit in actually. So let's navigate maybe to this Dark Pressure, which is a tech house expansion pack. Go to kits and subtypes. Maybe load in an analog kit. This Tyrant kit. Let's see what this has. Might load in something different actually. So we can flick to our pad mode. We can see that we've got 16 sounds loaded into this group. So now without any events created whatsoever, so we've just got an empty pattern at the moment. So let's look at the various different ways that we can start adding patterns in. So for starters, I'm going to hold select and click on my kick drum, because I'm going to start off by loading some kick drum samples. So with the kick drum selected, let's first look at step mode for adding a sound in. So I can go to my step mode here, and now these 16 pads become steps. So using step mode, I can add events into the sequence or into the pattern, step sequence events. So I've got this kick drum selected, and I can just add 4 kick beats, 4 kick drums, 4x4 pattern. And we actually have a fixed velocity control here. So if we look at our velocities, they're almost the same anyway. If we wanted to adjust these, or for a kick drum, you wanted to ensure all the kick drums that you add to the pattern are going to be at the exact same volume. I turn on the fixed velocity, and now when I add these, they're all added at a fixed level, so they're all identical levels, which is useful for a kick drum, but maybe not for something like some percussion or some hi-hats where you want a bit more of a dynamic, organic feel. So I've added the kick drums in. I could add like an extra thing there. And then I could go to my snare. So I hold select to load in a clap even. Go to my clap. And now I've got my clap selected. I can add in some claps. I can take them off and use a fixed velocity to add claps at a fixed velocity amount. Select hi-hat, load in some offbeat hi-hats, take off the fixed velocity. That one's too loud. And you can see the events are being created in here. If we go to our events, we can see our events are being added now, and we're starting to build up our beat. So let's maybe add one more sound via the step sequencing method. I use a tambourine and add some tambourines to this loop. Take off, go out of events, go back into step mode. So I've got some tambourines in there now as well. So let's look at the other method for inputting events into a sequence, and that's by recording them. So let's now select, let's go back into our pad mode and audition some different sounds. Okay, so we could add some percussion now. Let's actually make the pattern a little bit longer. At the moment, we're just looping over a little 1-bar section. Let's double the length of that pattern. We can do that by holding pattern, and then we get some pattern options up here. So I'm just going to double the length of the pattern. So now you can see we've got a 2-bar pattern happening. Go back to my pad mode. And let's record some of these in live. So all I need to do now is hit record. And now if I start hitting on the pads, that's going to be recorded into the sequence. So start off by adding some of these, this hit here. When we go back to my events, you can see we've added in those percussion hits. Still with the record on, I'm going to go back to my pad mode and look at this wood block and add some of these into the sequence. And add some wood block sounds into the sequence. You can see them being created there. Come out of record now. And you notice that everything's recorded in time. So we're going to switch to the software now to show you how you can tweak or customize that. So if I go over to my drop down here and go into preferences, and we have this input quantize here, and I've got this set to play and record, which means when we play back and play in pad sounds live, start triggering the pads, it's going to play it back in time, so quantized. And also when I record stuff, it's going to quantize it. So it depends on what kind of sounds you're adding, really, whether you want that to happen. So let's now take that off and put none. And close this, and then let's delete these percussion events that we created. And now let's go back and record some more stuff in live. So back to pad mode. And you can see now they're out of time. We turn those input quantize settings off for playback and record. So even if I'm not recording and I start playing some stuff back, it won't play it back in time. So obviously you're going to customize this to how your playing style and the way that you use the controller. But say for those events that we've just created, we will now want to get them in time. We actually have a quantize button on the controller. So if I select my events, go to events and select all, and these quantize here, we can access these controls by hitting shift. So I'm now going to go shift and quantize, and you can see it's quantize the notes to the nearest 16th note. If we didn't like that and we thought it's a bit too rigid, we actually get undo and redo buttons down here. So we can go shift, undo. I can undo that quantize, and we get a button next to the quantize 50%. So this will quantize these notes halfway between the out of time way that I've played them and the nearest 16th note. So now I can go shift, quantize 50%, and it just gets halfway to the nearest 16th note. So you retain some of that more natural feel. And you could do it again and it will get halfway again. So you're going to get closer and closer to the 16th note. Undo. And we have down here, we have undo, redo, step redo. So go back into record mode, back to pad mode, and I record in some shakers. Take it off record, go back to my events. You can see these shakers here. Undo will undo that whole sequence of events. So shift undo, it will take all those shakers out. I can put them back in. So this undo and redo work a bit like a series of events. They will undo and redo. Whereas step undo is just going to undo the very last step. So it's going to undo or take out each individual note. Again, depending on your workflow and what you're trying to do, having those two options is very useful. So I thought I'd record an extra section to this video because we haven't actually discussed the metronome yet regards adding sounds or adding patterns. So let's go ahead and load a couple of sounds on here. I'm going to load a kick drum. That's on my first pad. Any kick drum will do. I'll say any kick drum, not like that. It's the normal punchy kick drum. There we go. And let's load a snare onto the second slot. So if I wanted to record this, I haven't now got any frame of reference. If I hit record, oh, turn that off, you know, it's looping over a 1-bar section, but to get it in time, it might be useful to stick the metronome on. So you notice a couple of these, well, quite a lot of the buttons on Machine are double function buttons, and they'll have the main function in capitals, and then the second function will be in lowercase. And the way to access those second functions is to hold shift. So we've got this tap tempo button here, but if we hold shift, we turn the metronome on. And so now if I go back to my pad mode, we can hear the first beat in every bar is the higher click on the metronome. So we've got our frame of reference to record some sounds in, roughly in time. And we can go shift, turn the metronome on and off, and it makes it a lot easier for recording. If we go to our settings over here, we actually look at our metronome settings. So I can turn the metronome level up or down, depending on how I want to record stuff and how I want to hear it. I can change the timing of the metronome. Quarter notes is always going to be more useful because it's just going to provide a metronome for every beat of the bar, but if you wanted to change that, you can, of course. And we've got this auto on here, so I think by default that's how it's set up. So by default the metronome's not on, and you have to manually turn it on. However, if we turn this to auto on to record, turn the metronome off now, as soon as I start recording, it just turns on automatically. And then we have our counting here as well. So this is linked to this record button. So if you're recording, so if we shift metronome on and we have no counting, or we have 1-bar counting, and means we get 1 bar before we start recording. So if I add another sound into my third sound slot, I just get a 1-bar counting before I start recording, and then the Quantize buttons can be accessed in this settings section of the hardware controller as well. So you noticed I had the Quantize play record on there, so it automatically snapped those notes in time, even though I probably didn't play them in time. So you can change this to record Quantize only, or just have the Quantize off completely. So if we go to an empty pattern slot now, you can see that it's no longer automatically in time.